What if we had the courage to ask the big question, the silly question, the question that's on everyone's mind, but nobody has the courage to say out loud? What if, instead of thinking, bolne se kya hoga, we believed, bolne se sab hoga? That's the mission statement we are proposing today. And thank you for joining us for such a special Women's Day conversation. I'm Rochelle Pinto, the editor of Tweak India, and it is my great honor to be able to host this conversation with some of the most inspiring names in the country. At Tweak, we like to challenge old ideas and discover new ones. So when Google India asked us to gather together women who actively search for change, we knew exactly who to call. Allow me to introduce my panelists. We have Neena Gupta, one of India's most beloved and gifted actors. Chetna Gala Sinha, a social activist who founded India's first rural women's bank, Mandeshi. And Ananya Tiwari, co-founder of Swatalim Foundation, which works to educate women in marginalized communities. We have Anuja Chauhan, a best-selling author of books like The Zoya Factor and Those Pricey Thakur Girls. Huma, Qureshi, award-winning actor and newly minted author. Leeza Mangaldas, a pleasure-positive digital creator who shatters taboos like they're made of papad. We even have a Guinness World Record holder with us, twins Tashi and Nungshi, the first twin sisters to summit Everest. And rounding up our panel is Sapna, VP Marketing, India and Southeast Asia for Google. Our theme for today, Search for Change, addresses gender biases that women face daily, and how technology, like Google's voice search, helps them search for answers, to question their limits, and so much more. After all, information is power. I'd like to start by asking all of our panelists to share one gender bias they grew up believing or hearing, and what they did to flip that narrative in their life. I'd like to start with Neena ji.
Since I am from a Hindi medium school, college, and I am a Hindi speaking person. So in our literature, Hindi literature, a lot of times women, नारी बोलते थे, उसको अबला नारी कहा जाता था, मतलब बिचारी है, उसके पास कुछ strength नहीं है. So this is how I was, this is how what I used to think, that nari is abla. I just took the strength which was already inside me. I picked it up and got it out and laid it in front of me and said, no, you have it. No, you are not abla. You have it. So use it, enjoy it.
I'd like to take Chetna, if you could help us with your gender bias that you grew up believing and what you did to flip that.
When I remember that I was in the 6th standard, and my father told me that why don't you all two sisters go and open your bank account? So both of our sister, we went to the bank. And when we entered the bank, I saw that there was no women in the bank. And both of our sisters, we were talking about it. Like, कि कोई भी महिला नहीं है इस यहाँ. It remained in my mind. Even on the day when we were inaugurating our women's bank, it came again after so many years that, I had gone to the bank where there was a frame where all men are there. And today we are inaugurating the bank where all women are there.
That gave me goosebumps, Chetna. That was fantastic. I mean, it just shows how life comes full circle. That is so powerful. I'd like to take it to Anuja now.
So I actually grew up in a really romantic household. It was an army family and I was the youngest of 4 sisters. So we were always very encouraged, professionally, career-wise, this whole notion of you can do what you want to do, you can be what you want to be. The only department in which that didn't happen, perhaps because our father didn't talk to us about all this, was romance. And the kind of books I read, it was whether it was a Mills and Boon or it was slightly better literature, like Jane Austen or, with a lot of experience and all the agency. And there was a shrinking damsel, itni shy, will never do anything. And that stereotype was so, I didn't even know it was so strongly there, but it was.
And I think that is a perfect bridge to bring us to someone who's actively working to shattering the stereotypes. Leeza's smiling. She knows I'm talking about her.
Can I share 3 myths I grew up with? I'm actively seeking to dismantle. I certainly grew up believing that gender is necessarily and only binary. And I think I am still trying to dismantle that idea, and really thinking about what it means to be a woman and which gender expectations, even of that identity that I have so far venerated, I might like to discard. I also grew up believing that heterosexuality is the default setting. And lastly, I grew up believing that good girls don't want sex, don't like sex, and shouldn't ever talk about sex. And I think that's one I am breaking on a daily basis.
Huma, I'm going to come to you.
Well, I grew up in a middle-class Muslim family in Delhi. So I think, and I grew up in a family of a lot of boys. And being one of the few girls over there, like when we were children, we were always playing together and like, pushing each other around and beating each other up. And it was a very boisterous, noisy sort of upbringing I had. But as I grew up, I was suddenly told that I needed to be more polite. I needed to be gentler. I needed to be more like a lady. I couldn't do a lot of things that otherwise was sort of normal. And I was constantly told that, oh, you can't argue so much because don't be too bossy and loud and have an opinion and all those things. And I feel completely fine with it.
I think that we have two people here who have never listened to anyone telling them what they can and cannot do. Tashi and Nungshi, could we have you tell us what are the gender myths that you grew up believing?
Well, that's a very profound question, Rochelle. It's kind of strange, like how and from where we kind of developed it, but we grew up subconsciously believing that as human beings, women are meant to be second among equals, vis-a-vis men. That as girls, sky is the limit for us, but as boys, there is no limit. That as girls, we are free and capable of running the race with boys, but, they will always be the first ones past the finish line. That there's a clear, I would say, gender cap on our possibilities, which is often invisible to others, which we now like to call invisible mountains. That whenever a girl aspires to summit a peak, she has to carry with her this extra gender backpack to make it to the top. And this myth actually continued till we climbed our first major peak ahead of all the boys in the group at 18 years of age. Looking back, I think we realize how these myths and beliefs are strengthened through verbal and non-verbal messaging, both at home and outside.
I know that's going to really inspire a lot of young girls watching this today. Speaking of young girls, Ananya, you are front and center dealing with young girls every day, helping educate them.
So I was born and brought up in Kanpur, and I always saw women who were around me kind of leading a same kind of life. It was very similar template. And I think when I, of course, grew up and went out, I met a lot of women. It doesn't matter what they are doing in their lives, but I kind of understood that they were able to have some agency, to have a philosophy and ideology of their own lives. It was possible to see women like that. So I think that was a shift in the way I also thought about my life. And it speaks a lot to the presence of role models. So it's not just about talking, but your sheer presence, I think, speaks volumes.
So I'm going to come to you, Sapna.
Wow, what a extreme range of amazing insights that have been shared. As I reflected, and what comes to mind is for generations, I've always been told or seen that usually women follow their men, let's say for postings, for jobs, wherever men are going. And that's something I've seen, whether it's my grandfathers and even my own father. When he moved, my mother traveled. And so interestingly, when I got married, my husband needed to move to the other side of the world, and I followed. And that was something I just went ahead with. I didn't even think. And then the opportunity came for my career about 5 years ago. And I hesitated to ask him because I didn't think that he would follow me for my career. And it was the wrong actual thought process that went in my head, but I didn't have any examples of too many examples of this happening. And I brought it up with him. I said I had this opportunity to move to Singapore, bigger role, bigger scope, bigger impact. And he was like, yeah, why not? Let's go. And so I think you can break the myth only if you get confidence. I don't know why I wasn't confident, but clearly it was all of the stereotypes that I've had and I've grown up with all of my life.
Thank you for sharing that. And, it's wonderful to have a spouse who supports you. I think we all realize the importance of support. Some women support women, but it's for real change, it's important for support to be across the board. We're talking about Bolne Se Sab Hoga. And I'd like to take this back to Neena ji, who is living proof that this philosophy works. Neena ji, a few years ago, you publicly asked for work. It was an unprecedented move. And it's safe to say you are enjoying a career renaissance. What did you learn from that experience of speaking out and using your voice to demand what was your due?
People used to come to me and have tears in their eyes. Ma'am, you're so brave. You're so brave. I used to think मैंने तो कुछ ऐसा बहादुरी का काम नहीं किया, but they were also in the same boat like me, who were very shy to say what you want to say. Like हमको तो बचपन से सिखाया है कि modesty is the best policy. Modest रहना चाहिए. मैं तो कहती हूँ बेशरम होना चाहिए आज के जमाने में. You have I used to do this. I used to say किसी ने बोला बड़ा अच्छा काम किया तुमने इसमें. नहीं वो ठीक है पर ये ऐसा कर सकती थी मैं. Why? Say I'm good. So we are all conditioned कि बोलना नहीं है. I think जमाना बदल गया है. Time आ गया है. You in हिंदी भी से अपना डंका खुद बजाना पड़ेगा. You have to say I am good. But you should be good also. You should not say I'm good when you know that you are not good.
Fabulous. Before I move on to the next question, I just want a quick show of hands of everyone who believed in what Neena ji was saying, that modesty is the best policy. And every time we received a compliment, we just downplayed it. We just refused to accept it. Could I just have a quick show of hands? That is, I mean, look at this. Just look at this. We're all fantastic, accomplished women who all feel the same. I mean, thank you, Neena ji, for inspiring us. There's so much unlearning that all of us have to do on a daily basis. Tashi, Nungshi, you not only are you one of the very few women mountaineers that we know of and we see, but you also started at a ridiculously young age. I don't know how your parents let you do it, but fantastic. So tell us, how did you get people to take you seriously?
I would say this hasn't been easy, and it does require best of our creativity and persistence. Yeah. Just to put this in context, let me confess that despite a very supportive family, one of the earliest big challenges to our climbing dream was getting their approval. When we shared our dream of climbing Everest, it shocked our parents, and while dad recovered, believing it was a ridiculous dream born out of this naive fascination that will soon go away, mom's initial reaction was over my dead body. This process actually delayed our attempt by a full year. We had spent long hours just strategizing, how to get them to say yes. Dad takes pride in walking the talk, and he always proudly told us, to follow our dream. So we fired it back at him. We're like, but Dad, you yourself always asked us to follow our passion, and climbing Everest is a dream. You are a military man, we expect you to live by your words. I guess this is the kind of creative stuff you have to apply sometimes to really get your dreams. So a very supportive family, but a reluctant mom, and we're glad that we could actually persuade them, even if it meant a year of not giving up. That was so crucial. Mm-hmm.
Well, you guys have climbed, physical peaks. We have somebody who's climbed metaphorical mountains. Chetna ji, you have helped an entire community of women achieve something that perhaps they didn't think was possible: financial independence. It's something that we at Tweak India also are vociferous advocates for. I want you to tell us a little bit about how you've seen, women's financial independence, especially in rural communities, how it has impacted their lives, and as Neena ji was talking about, how it has given them confidence.
Actually, I would say not only just impacted them and what I have done, but there are a lot of things which I have learned from them. So let me narrate one of the experience which I had with Rupali Shinde. She got married at the age of 14, and she was a very bright student. But her father got her married because she had other 3 sisters also. And so she said that on the day of marriage, she got her result and she had scored 90%. And she comes from Dalit community. So she knew that next day I am going to work on leather tanning businesses, like chamde ka business hai. And we have lot of people who are having banking with us from that business. और उसमें बहुत सारा abuse होता है, यानी you are cheated. So Rupali also in her payment was cheated, and she had paid some 30,000 rupees, but that person said that you have not paid us. And she was like coming, it was very difficult for her to fight that. So, but fortunately she had record of checkbook, which was so important. And I didn't realize this lady who has not been to the school, who has and had that. So we could fight that whole thing. And Rupali became, and not only that, but then when we started mobile banking, she came first and she said, I'm going to use the digital banking. And so we made her a head of our digital banking as a head of the training department in the bank. The way she brought the confidence in other women, that when she was doing a digital banking, she was saying like, in a bank, we said that you need to remember a PIN number. And so we'll have a financial literacy for that, and you remember the PIN number. But women said that find some other solution. What about biometric? And so we said, okay, why don't we adapt that with the digital banking? And we did that. And women use thumb instead of PIN number. And you know what they said? They said कि मेरा PIN number तो मेरा कोई भी चुरा सकता है, मेरा अंगूठा तो कोई नहीं काट सकता है ना. And that was the lesson for me actually, that what our women were saying, it's not an access to finance, but control on finance. That is one. And the second lesson, what they were teaching me was never give poor solutions to poor people.
Chetna ji, you are really like, first I got goosebumps, now I've got tears in my eyes. You've just taking us on an emotional journey today. That was so fantastic. And I just want to take a moment for all of us to acknowledge the extreme privilege that we enjoy. And thank you for sharing that story of women like Rupali who, are surmounting odds that many of us have never had to face in our lives. So I want to take this question to Huma. There are more women working in Bollywood today than ever before. And crucially, women working in positions of power where they can make decisions that really influence the culture. How do you feel that has changed what we see on screens and what happens behind the scenes?
I mean, I've been now working for 10 years, but purely just in terms of what are the kind of films being written, what are the kind of female characters being written, what are the kind of budgets of women can lead today, and not just the top 1 or 2 stars, but like so many other people. I think all that has definitely changed and it's moving in a very, very healthy direction. When you have more women working behind the camera as well, it leads to a much better working environment for everybody. And I feel like there's so many sets that even today when I walk onto, and they're probably just 1 or 2 female, and that could be like a hairstylist at best and nobody else. So you're just like, oh my God, like how, and nobody even bothers. Like, do we have a female Lou? How will they get back home if you're shooting in Film City? So many conversations that are sort of, were not being addressed even till 5 years ago, but I think now are definitely, being discussed. Steps are being taken. Like I'm recently working on a series called Maharani, and we have 2 women who are assistant camera, people. And it makes me so proud because you never have women. I mean, you've had female DOPs, but a camera assistant, because it's such a male space, right? Because women can't be seen like, lugging heavy equipment or like working with the boys or like, and it makes me so happy to see both of them. Like as an actor, the choice that I have is to play characters, or at least if there's a script that comes to me and I look at something which has such a heavy gender bias, in my own way, I can have a conversation about it and be like, why are we saying a story this particular way, or why is my character doing this? And I'm not saying always you win those battles, because it's a complicated space, and no matter where you are, there's always that glass ceiling that you're constantly sort of fighting against. But I feel like the idea is to start engaging in dialogue and raising your hand up and being like, 1 second, why are we doing this, or can we change this?
Thank you for that. I think that it's so important, as you said, to speak up with whatever power you have, whatever agency you have. Use your privilege to give voice to others. We have somebody with us today who, manages to address and navigate very serious topics without coming across as if she's pontificating. And it's something that we at Tweak India try to do as well. Anuja, I'm going to come to you.
I always feel this, that nobody is going to pick up a book or watch a film because it's a moral science class. You have to entertain as well. You have to be funny. What I've also realized is that funny may be power structure hai. Humor is power. It is. So, like, if you go to a party, for example, and it's a traditionally a very male space again. If somebody's telling jokes at a party, 9 times of 10, it is a man, and the people standing around him laughing and all are usually women. That's how it works. Because when you are the one telling the joke, you are dropping the punchline, you are the one controlling when people will laugh, when people will hang on with bated breath, when people will draw breath and say, why, yaar, kya banda hai? And it's usually a banda. So I think my thing is I'm a little competitive about this. When I go to parties and I'm holding my wine glass, I want to be the funny person. I laugh at my jokes. So I think that's part of that whole thing. Maybe it's that's the way I try to battle this particular thing and say, oh, you have a notion of what sort of books women write. Well, I'm not going to fit in your little box and say that ab ye chick hai to ye chick lit likhegi. Aisa kuch nahi hai. I mean, I can write about anything. I've written about politics, and I've written about cricket, and I've written about family property disputes. I've written a war book set in 71 about an Air Force pilot. So I'm saying you can go anywhere, and why not? Nobody should be able to tell you that. And that whole struggle and saying it funnily, the medium is also the message.
I think that was a very powerful message. I love the visual that you put in our minds of, a man standing and telling a joke surrounded by women laughing. I think when you said it, immediately it came back to me. Exactly. That's so true. We do have a woman on our panel who is very comfortable owning, the conversation and being the center of attention. I want to come to you, Leeza. Since you've begun this journey, how have you seen the conversation change? What are the kinds of questions that women are asking, to empower themselves?
When I started talking about sex on the internet about 5 years ago, I think a lot of people just couldn't wrap their heads around what I was trying to do. Like, they were like, are you a gynecologist? Are you a porn star? Like, the idea of a person, let alone a woman, talking about sex voluntarily in a way that was free of shame and in a way that just felt normal was something that I think it took some getting used to. It was like, why is she doing this? I think as women particularly, we are made to feel like we don't even deserve access to this domain. Like, this is not our thing. We must only be reluctant participants in sex, ideally only with a husband, an opposite sex, same religion, same caste partner after marriage, right? That is the context within which we are, even remotely allowed to think about having sex. And ideally, the objective should be babies, not orgasms, right? In 2018, shortly after I started my channel, Me Too happened. Also, Section 377 was repealed. And I think suddenly people were recognizing that sexuality is something we need to talk about, that silence and shame actually breeds violence, And then there was such an outpouring of people wanting to share their stories and asking the most personal questions, in the sense, sharing their own most personal questions. And I think it was just like, wow.
Thank you for that. Your work shows us how access to information has the power to change lives, no matter the subject. And I think the pandemic brought that into greater relief because we were looking at, children, for example, studying digitally and how important it was for them to have access to information, and technology really helped them. Ananya, I want you to tell us a little bit about how the past few years have really brought this idea into, indisputable arena where without technology and without having access to information, we really can't move forward, especially when we look at girls from marginalized communities.
It was frankly the pandemic. And I say that because so we work in Haryana specifically, and in areas where female literacy is 32%. There are also a lot of intersectional layers at operation. So there's caste, class, they're first generation learners coming to school for the first time. There are also religious minorities. And so you kind of put all of this together and then you reach the group we work with. They also go to schools which have very low expectations from them. So whether it's the parents or the teachers, and I do not want to put a blame on one segment of stakeholders because we are also kind of talking about a structural setup here. And so digital education, frankly, was not in the picture at all, at least for this group or this community that we work with. it was the pandemic. And what happened during that time was the schools are residential schools. Not a lot of people in India know about these schools, but the government has a special scheme called KGBVs or Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas. And these schools were specifically established in educationally backward blocks throughout the country. The schools were closed and they were sent back. And what happened was we started losing out on some girls to marriage. And in this case, it was, of course, all early marriage cases. And we wanted to bring them back to school. So that was our only goal, that whenever the schools reopen, the girls are coming back to school. We did everything we could. Internet doesn't work. We found out that the internet penetration at that point of time was 34% actually in the communities. There was another layer of barrier, which is there is access to resources. So even if we look at household having a device for itself, but after that, there is gendered access to technology as well. Mm-hmm. Who owns the mobile phone? And so something that Chetna was also talking about, right? It's the men. And oftentimes, adolescent girls with phones, there's a lot of cultural connotation also to it. So it's not seen very respectfully by the parents and by the society. So that is something that's not encouraged. And we had a team of volunteers who were constantly talking on phone to the parents. And we were just negotiating for 30 minutes of their time. And we started using IVRS, interactive voice response system, which does not use internet. And so it doesn't matter. They only need to have a basic phone, which has buttons in it. And we started creating content and educational stories so that they can listen to it. A lot of times what happened eventually towards the end was they would put it on loudspeakers. So it was also their mothers and sisters who were now listening to the stories.
Sapna, for true change to really, permeate through every layer of society, it can't just be, at a campaign level, even though campaigns are powerful, it really has to be systemic. It has to be organizational. I'd love to hear from you. What is Google doing, for the women who work within their environment, especially since tech is traditionally considered a male-dominated field? How is Google really empowering women to use their voice and to speak up for themselves?
Fundamentally, our mission is around universal access to information for everyone. That word universal means for everyone. And we take that seriously. And when it comes to the work that we do, but also for our employees. When we look at the numbers, one of the biggest things that we do is we publish what's called a diversity report annually. And we acknowledge where our gap is. And every year for the last 6 years, our numbers are going up for women representation. And I think it's on the back of a number of things. One is policies. I'll tell you, when I had my twins about 10 years ago, where I was working at the time, didn't have great policies, from nursing facilities to time off. Google has great parental leave policies, probably one of the best in the industry. But we also have something called ramp back time. It's actually, once you come back from leave, the expectation is like, oh, it's like you never left. So we have this period of time where you're working 25%, 50%, and you ramp back over a period of time. I think this is just this understanding. We talk about these things, and when we acknowledge them and we put it out there for the world to see. I think the other thing is role modeling. I will say, our CEO, if you look at his leadership team, there are women that have amazing jobs. Our CEO of YouTube is a woman. We have many, many role models who have been given big jobs. And I think role modeling is critical in this space. People ask me why I have become a woman in tech, and it's because of my mother. She was in the sciences, and I saw her doing it. So if she could do it, then of course I can do it. And so we need more role models. And so it's not just about, okay, let's have women in the workplace or women at Google. We need to see women in leadership. So that's another thing. The last but not least is, what are we doing for the world beyond this in the ecosystem? We can help our own employees, but look, if the talent pipeline isn't there, how are we going to be able to, see a world of change? So we have invested in education. We do everything from scholarship programs to realizing that women need to make this shift into digital and technology, and they're not leaping into it themselves. They're holding themselves back, I think, and it's happening. Women are the most educated when it comes to college, somehow after that, they're pulling themselves out, they're holding themselves back. So what are the infrastructure that we're putting in place, whether to help empower them, mentor them, network with them, give them the education that they feel they need? Because women don't do something unless they think they're 100% qualified for something, right? Whereas a lot of times men will take that leap. Oh, I don't know it, but I'll figure it out. So we realize that we need to help women feel that confidence through educational programs. So we have 2 or 3 educational programs where we spend quite a bit of time as well. And I just wanted to say last, and thank you all for being here with us today. We realize the power of information, and all of the stories here today, we're realizing on our products, people are asking these questions. How do I deal with financial empowerment? Well, how do I get equal pay in the workplace? Where can I get educated for these things? How do I grow my confidence? How to have an orgasm, right? All of these things, people are asking questions. And that's why, we feel better today than ever before that we can be helpful.
Thank you for that, Sapna. I know that I ask my Google Home questions all the time, from the most profound to the most idiotic, and thankfully it doesn't judge me. I hope not. I just want to wrap on a high. So really quickly, because we're almost out of time, I'd love to ask each of you to share with us, how would you advise young women to use their voice potently to search for change?
It's not only family. Country also wants to be proud of you. Society also wants to be proud of you. People are celebrating the startups owned by women. Bankers also want to be proud to be investors in those startups. So I would just say that best time is there. We can break all the records. Just start it.
First of all, I feel that you have to be financially independent. That's the most important thing for a woman. Then you have to be smart, self-esteem, self-confidence, then speak. Because then whatever you will say will mean something. Otherwise, nobody takes you seriously.
We haven't talked about men at all and their role. If they set that example, that's really important. And I think also we need to bring up our boys, right? So if you're a young woman with children, it's okay, girl child. Yes, the girls know. The girls are already believing and agreeing with us. How we bring up boys is really important.
We have to just unburden ourselves from the expectation of others. I think a lot of conversation we had today is about like how we judge ourselves, because we've been conditioned to think of ourselves a certain way, our achievements, our choices, our lifestyle, our morality. Even in the films that we make, either we put women on a pedestal or they are the vamp. So I feel like we have to like unburden ourselves from this idea of what it is to be a woman. And of course, economic independence is important, because but that's only a springboard, I feel. I feel eventually it's about also being emotionally independent, of understanding no need to have tags of being either somebody's wife or somebody's daughter or somebody's whatever. You have to be okay with being you. A man's identity is not tied around to who he is with, but a woman's is. You could decide to be a career person, you could decide to get married and have children. Ultimately, it's about individual choice. Each woman should have the power of their own bodies, over their own mind, their own career choices, and actual empowerment, in the truest sense, as opposed to having an idea of being empowered.
As women growing up, I think we constantly get the message that we have to make ourselves small and quiet and diminished, tone it all down, sit with your legs crossed, don't laugh too loudly, don't go out, don't wear this. So I think, first of all, use your voice, like tone it up, pump up the volume, and I think this conditioning really extends very acutely into the sexual and reproductive health and rights arena. When it comes to navigating consent, as a woman, you are going to be judged if you are sexually assertive and you want something and you ask for it, and you're also going to be judged if you don't want sex, or you're not in the mood, or this is not something you're enjoying, right? So it's hard to say yes, it's hard to say no, and there's no room for maybe, right? So I hope that we can use our voices to navigate consent and absolutely feel entitled to expressing ourselves in that.
A voice is only as potent and inspirational as the accomplishment of its source. And that voice gets traction when backed by others. That's from a personal experience such as ours. So on one hand, I think what women should do is we should constantly raise our bar in whatever we are doing. And on the other, let's actively support and make visible each other's work. When Tash and I almost lost heart and hope with the kind of passion that we had envisioned for ourselves, it was in surrounding ourselves with people who were doers, believers, that we today stand at a place where we can, confidently say that nothing is impossible. But the bigger question is to ask ourselves, why are we doing what we are doing? Because often or not, we get lost in that conversation and vision and thought, and somehow don't find answers to that.
I think when I was growing up, my teacher told me that choose your battles carefully. So a lot of times you might be surrounded by a lot of pain points and things that want your attention, and they're rightfully yours. Like, you need to fight them. But she gave me an example which actually really made sense to me. And she said, look, if you're in your house and your parents say, don't wear this, don't wear that, you're like, okay, I'll do what you say. Don't make your hair in this manner, that manner. Obey that. But just make sure that your education continues. So there you speak up, because that is the real thing. So I kind of started paying less attention to things that can wait, because I can do those things now. I can wear and I can go wherever I want to. But perhaps at that point, it was just necessary to focus on one thing that would really make a difference in your life.
I'll say information is empowering, right? I think in the absence of information, it's been brought up in terms of education, financial education, knowing how to conduct yourself. All of these things come from the power of knowledge and information. That's what's democratizing. And so when women hold themselves back in the absence of information, and so I wanted to say a big thank you for everyone's sharing of wisdom, because that's the information that people need to move forward.
Thank you so very much to all our panelists. I feel humbled, I feel inspired, I feel like I can climb a mountain. Tashi, Nungshi, maybe I'll join you next time. I hope you all have a wonderful Women's Day. I know we celebrate it just once a year, but truly this is the year that we are going to make every day Women's Day. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful year.